Hi everyone, welcome to today's UC Davis MBA application and GMAT partner math tips webinar. I'm Amy Russell. I am the Deputy Director of Admissions for the UC Davis MBA. Delighted to have you guys all coming here from around the world. Also joined by a few wonderful people as well too. Later today, you're going to be hearing from Brett Etheridge, CEO and founder of Dominate the GMAT. Brett is one of our GMAT prep partners who will be sharing some great tips with you. And then immediately in my room, working hard behind the scenes, you'll get to meet Sam Bishop-Green, who's our Associate Director of Admissions. He will be answering your questions in the Q&A box, so feel free to send them your way. And then our web guru, who's been in charge of all communications and setting up this great webinar, and who's going to keep things going for us today, is Ethan Kirk. All right, so why don't we go ahead and jump on in. So here at UC Davis, we talk a lot about destination impact. The idea is this is a degree that's going to help you make a larger impact in your communities, in your careers, in the places where you serve. So if you're looking for a place that will make you a larger version of who you are, UC Davis is the spot to go after your MBA degree. You'll see our MBA students are doing incredible things out there in the world. We were fortunate to have 3 of our MBA students selected as one of the top 100 MBAs to watch in 2017. I encourage you to go to our website afterwards to read more about each of them. Dom on the left-hand side, he comes to us from the German military. And Dom right now was the president of our ambassador program, really helping to welcome new students into the class, served a lot of leadership capabilities while he was here. He's at the Tesla Gigafactory. Anna, who you see on the bottom right, she was working in the CPG industry and has done a lot of work in corporate social responsibility, served on some leadership boards for different female affinity groups, and she's over working as a senior product manager at Amazon. And then Rob on the top right-hand side actually comes to us from the military. Rob was the president of our Net Impact Group, and he actually, one of his last projects was together, they raised $5,000 to install solar panels on low-income housing. He's out there at PG&E. You see Grace Glow over there is one of our best and brightest MBAs as well too. Encourage you guys, come on back to our website to read more information there. So all of these students give a sense of how UC Davis MBAs don't just take care of themselves, but they really make a larger impact in the communities and in the companies in which they serve as well too. One of the ways they do that is through our impact curriculum. So you see that on the right-hand side. It stands for Integrated Management Project, Articulation, and Critical Thinking. I'll start with the ACT first because that's actually one of the earlier classes you'll take as a core class. And in this class, we're going to be thinking about how do you tackle problems most effectively? How do you really identify what the issue is that the business is facing so that you can come up with the right proposal? And then how do you best present yourself, both verbally and writing, to galvanize the companies in which you're serving, to not only have employees get the job done, but to have people that are bought into the larger mission who are eager to jump in and do more. And then the Integrated Management Project is a capstone project that you'll take on in your final year of your MBA. This is your opportunity to do consulting for a Fortune 500, government agency, or a late-stage startup. You're going to be addressing a high-level business issue, and you're going to be pulling throughout the organization to gather information, make recommendations. At the end, you'll be presenting your recommendations to senior leadership. To give you a sense of the scope of our integrated management project, I'll give you one example. So there was one of the companies in which our students had consulted for had actually gotten called in front of Congress to testify about why they decided to make this decision when the market was making a different decision. And the CEO sat up there and she said, well, one of the big reasons is because I had a study commission that I commissioned through UC Davis MBAs, and this is actually the market research that they found out. And Congress asked her to submit that report, and they accepted those findings as well too. So this is to give you a sense about this is the impact that you can make here through the lessons that you'll learn. And these are all wonderful things that you can add to your resume to help you create new opportunities as well. Impact and career, we know this is an investment that you're making. And there are some stats that you can look on the right-hand side. With our full-time class that graduated in 2016, 100% of them had internship placements. 91% of our graduating students were placed within 3 months of graduation with an average compensation of $110K. We have students from a wide range of industries, from nonprofit to tech to finance and accounting, all throughout the area within that. And then for those of you in the part-time, so those full-time stats are part of our rankings. Any school that's US News ranked will have that out there for you to see. On the part-time side, that's not part of the ranking. So we did 2 surveys. The most recent one in 2012 to 2015 showed that 92% of our students earned a salary increase. You hope that would happen, but the remarkable thing is the average increase was 48% above pre-MBA earnings. 2/3 of them were promoted or landed in a new position, both during their time in the MBA as well as afterwards. The reason being is because we have a career development team that are partners with our students in their career development success. So they work with them through both individual and group sessions, their skills workshops, we have career fairs, and then company treks where you're actually going out to different companies to see how they are operating and doing business and making connections as well too. Okay. So those are a few highlights about the UC Davis MBA. We'll have other sessions that will be focused on that. We wanted to give you guys a lot of tips that you can use with the application deadlines coming around the corner. Our first application deadline will be on October 11th. So we wanted to give you some tangible tools to pull together your strongest material. So we take a holistic approach towards admissions. So see, it's a circle. We truly mean it is a circle, which means there's not one area that is prioritized over the other. We're going to look at your academic aptitude. What is your ability to handle the rigor of the UC Davis MBA? Your professional promise. What have you done thus far in industry, and what are you looking to do with the MBA, and how is that a match? And then your personal qualities as well too. So we're looking at a fit. It's a very collaborative space. Our students are very invested in developing others in their team. This is a high-level overview of what you're going to need. I'm going to go ahead and walk you through them step by step as well too. On the resume, what I would recommend doing is jump off of your current resume that you have. Ideally, though, what you want to do is bring it down to 1-page ideal, 2 if absolutely needed. This should be an accomplishment base, so the highlights of what you've done. So it should cover the totality of your career, but the bullet should actually cover what is the best parts of your career. Where you can, I would say quantify your achievement. So don't just say, I did this or I managed a team, but say I managed a team and I increased sales by 100%, bringing in an additional $5 million in revenue. Put some numbers around it so we immediately know how effective you are. And then lastly, be authentic and be yourself. As you think about your resume as a whole, I would think of it as a highlights and brag sheet. So if you were going to go in and ask for a promotion, what would be your key talking points? And that's what you want to make sure are there on your resume. You'll see some tips out there, like some people are spending a lot of time on the resume, some are hiring professional resume writers. I would just encourage you, use what you have, make sure it's polished, make sure it goes in reverse chronological, and then really help us see what really delineates you from the other applicants. Okay. Recommendations. So when you go to pick your recommenders, you want to be very strategic in that. So we're looking for professional letters of recommendation. So there are, versus academic. So one should be from your current direct supervisor or manager. The other one can be from any other professional you've worked with, someone you've reported, same company, different company, perhaps someone that is that you have volunteered with as well too. It should be substantive. So it should be from someone who has time and has gotten to know you very well. So we don't really actually care about the title. It's great if you know the CEO, but not if all the CEO can do is say you're a great person. We really want to have someone who's familiar with your work and talk with you about it. So a few tips. I would have a conversation about your recommender. If you're looking at a part-time program, I would actually do a quick Google search about asking your employer for support. If you're looking at a full-time program, it's a much more straightforward conversation, which is about what am I looking to do and how can the MBA match into that. Help them help you, so make it really easy for them. So give them a copy of your accomplishment-based resume. Sit down with them to have that conversation so they understand why. Also share with them, why are you asking them? What elements of your work do you think could really benefit from having it be highlighted in the recommender? Don't make it too easy. So some recommenders will ask you to write some bullets. I really discourage you from doing that because we will be very wary of any kind of language patterns that are similar to yours. What you should also be aware of is we are on the common recommendation this year through GMAT. So if you have other schools that you're applying to and using the common recommendation, they can actually write one recommendation with a few supplemental questions for us. Sit down with them, have that big picture idea, give them that context and examples, and then keep them updated. These guys are big allies for you, not only in this admissions process, but through the totality of your career, helping to create opportunities for you. So let them know when you submit that application. Let them know when you interview, when you get in. Keep them updated when you're here at school so that they can be long-term partners for you in your success. Essays. We are very pragmatic in our essays, so we have two. The first one is a goals essay. So if you ever interact with Sam or any of our associate directors, oftentimes we're going to ask you to tell us about you, what do you do now, and what are you looking to do with the MBA? And this is what that essay captures. So we want to know what your post-MBA goals are and how you're going to make that happen. So share with us your vision and how you're going to bring it together. This is a great place to quantify out some of those achievements and share those stories. And then the second portion is just to the point. So we want to know what's the most interesting personal thing about you. What is a highlight about you that will make you memorable? And our thought process behind this is our students that are able to help make themselves memorable, they have a better, they stick better with their recruiters. Recruiters are meeting so many people, and we want to have folks that rise to the top in that. The other element is it's a tight-knit community, so we want to make sure we're bringing in a diversity of perspectives into that, okay? If you like, it's optional. You're welcome to add a video or add pictures as well too, but the prompt itself is just 2 to 3 sentences. What you should know is for the first prompt, what I'll share with you, we say 300 words max. We're not going to count the words, so if you're close, that's totally fine. If you're egregiously over, that's where you should be concerned. These are a couple of examples of the second essay. So what makes you memorable? Last year we asked, or a couple of years ago, we asked folks to tweet last year and the year before. So you'll see these are some action shots and people are showing off their personality, they're showing off the energy and the unique elements that they'll bring to the class. Transcripts, we want to receive one from every single institution that you've attended. So if you went to community college, share those with us, your degree awarding institutions as well. Unofficials are fine for your application. Officials are needed if you are looking at enrolling in the fall. And then the language assessment. It's only needed if a native language is not English. If you completed your degree in an English-speaking country, TOEFL or IELTS is not required. And you'll see some information on the minimum score requirement for TOEFL and IELTS. These exams should be taken within the last 2 years and released to UC Davis as well too. Finally, with that said, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Brett Etheridge, who is the founder of Dominate the GMAT. We've worked with Brett over a number of years, and we are delighted to have him with us today to share with you guys some tips.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. You got my wheels spinning, thinking about 2 to 3 sentences about the most interesting thing about me. So I guess by way of introduction, I am coming to you guys from Knoxville, Tennessee, but I've actually lived permanently in 3 different countries at various times, speak parts of 5 different languages. I guess I can't claim to speak them all fluently. And love to travel. I've traveled extensively. So, but I am here in Knoxville, so welcome to all of you from really, I'm sure, all around the country and potentially all around the world. I'd love to be able to sit down and chat with each of you, but I am thrilled to be able to share with you just some insight into the GMAT and give you some specific, very tangible, practical kind of take-home tips and strategies for getting right answers, for doing well, especially on the math portion, which is what I'm going to focus on today, and then also equip you with some resources to be able to study for the GMAT in the most effective way possible. So we have a lot to cover, and we'll go ahead and dive in. You know, at the end of the day, what I want to do is kind of shape your thinking about the GMAT, and let's just address it up front. right? I mean, I'm sure you are not thrilled about having to take the GMAT. I remember when I was sitting in your guys' shoes. It's been a while. It's been about a decade since I was looking to go back to graduate school myself, business school. And, you know, it was just one of those things where it's like, man, I got to take this thing called the GMAT, right? And so at the end of the day, I understand why you're taking it, right? It seems like there's a standardized test for everything, but here's kind of the good news around that and the way we kind of want to frame our thinking. You know, ultimately your goal is to use the GMAT as a stepping stone on your path to getting accepted. Here's just kind of a testimonial one of my students submitted, and I love it because he literally said, hey, at the end of the day, you know, I boosted my score, but at the end of the day, I'm going to the business school I wanted, and wasn't that the whole point after all? And that really is your goal. Your goal is to get a high score, and the way that we attack the GMAT needs to have that in mind. You know, I've never had a student come to me saying, I want to become an algebra expert, or man, I'm really afraid that I'm going to have to find the hypotenuse of a right triangle in business school. So, you know, I just want to take this GMAT thing so that I can learn all of that stuff, you know, or all this weird English grammar or whatever. That's not really the point of taking the GMAT. The point is to get right answers and get a score that will make you a competitive candidate for your target business schools. And I remember that was my mindset. So this was me. I was working in Washington, D.C., kind of my first job after graduating. I went to Duke undergrad, and here I was kind of moving and shaking in the Washington, D.C. kind of policy space, and realized that it was time to go back to school. And when I did, I actually started teaching the GMAT. And so this is me kind of teaching in my first GMAT teaching job back in Denver over 10 years ago. And I had an experience where I was applying for that job, and I showed up, and the owner of the company gave me a quiz of a handful of questions, both quant and verbal questions. And I'm going through those questions, and I got to a challenging one, right? And I had two thoughts. My first thought was, like, I bet I'm supposed to be able to get all of these right. Like, if I'm going to get this job, I probably need to be able to get all these questions right. Like, what do I do? And my second thought was, okay, I need to figure out how to still get this question right, even though it wasn't immediately obvious to me in a traditional way. I ended up solving that problem in a non-traditional way, got it right, got the job. And I took that mindset into teaching the GMAT, always with an eye towards, okay, how do we apply what you're learning to getting right answers? And so for you, as you're sitting there thinking about preparing for the GMAT, I know some of you have already probably started to prepare. Some of you might have a very short window of opportunity to prepare for the GMAT to boost your score. Maybe some of you are starting from scratch, but I want to start shaping your thinking kind of that way, because that is the most effective way to prepare for the GMAT. So I want to kind of take the 30,000-foot overview, give you a quick background on what you're in store for, since I know some of you are going to be new to the whole GMAT experience. And then, like I said, we're going to get very practical with some things. So I hope you're ready to take some notes in the time that we have together, help you get some more right answers. And then, like I said, we'll wrap it all up with some resources and suggestions for you. So the GMAT obviously stands for the Graduate Management Admission Test, and it measures verbal, mathematical, analytical, and writing skills that you have, in theory, developed over time. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times I'll have students reach out to me and say, Brett, I wasn't even good at math back in high school. Like, even, you know, it's a funny thing. I always say, and actually the statistics kind of bear this out, people who are kind of closer to their high school years, so kind of the 18 to 25-year-old demographic of people taking the GMAT. And I always think that's interesting that people would take the GMAT like in their 19, 20 years old because they're still in undergrad. But they end up having the higher quant scores. And I think the reason is because this type of math is freshest in your mind. So for a lot of you, you may have to actually learn this stuff for the first time or relearn it. But at the end of the day, that's really kind of what it's measuring. But it's also a reasoning test. So it's not just a matter of trying to learn a bunch of stuff. You know, the GMAT wants to make sure that you're able to reason. And from that standpoint, it is a good predictor of your success in business school. Because will you ever have to find the hypotenuse of a right triangle in business school? I certainly never did. But I did have to think critically, and I did have to use analytical skills, and I did have to use quantitative skills. And that's all demonstrated on the GMAT. It is that means to an end that we talked about. Your score is good for 5 years. So I know you guys are all here on this call because you're looking to apply, some of you as early as round one. But, if something happens, something comes up, hey, get your GMAT score, get it in your back pocket, and you could use it down the road if you needed to. A lot more information at www.mba.com. That's sort of your one-stop shop for all things admission or GMAT related in terms of when you're going to, how you're going to reserve your spot, where you're going to find testing centers and locations, all of that type of stuff there. All right, so let's take a look at, again, what you're in store for. There are 4 major sections of the GMAT. I'm just going to bring them up quickly because they're not in sequential order anymore. And I'm going to talk about that here in a moment. You used to have to take these sections in order. Now you have the opportunity, as of a couple of months ago, to select the order in which you take these sections. But you will take 4 sections and receive 3 separate scores. You will have 1 distinct and separate essay score from 0 to 6. This is an analysis of an argument. You're given an argument prompt, you dissect it, you poke holes in it, you talk about ways to strengthen it, and you write it in essay format. You'll also have an integrated reasoning section where you'll receive a separate score from 1 to 8. This is a lot of charts and graphs and tables and taking information and answering questions about that information. And then you'll have the quantitative and verbal sections that collectively form your 200 to 800 point score. And this is sort of the holy grail score, right? When UC Davis prints its median GMAT score or its 80 percentile range of scores, or gives you an expected score range, this is the score they're talking about. Right? We don't usually often talk about what we want of you on your essay score or your integrated reasoning score. While they're important and they don't want you to bomb those scores, it's this 200 to 800 point quant and verbal score that is really where you want to focus. The quantitative section is comprised of run-of-the-mill math problems called problem-solving questions, and then a very unique question format called data sufficiency. If you haven't seen those yet, get ready to kind of strap on your seatbelt. They're a little different than you may have ever seen before. But once you learn to do them the right way, a lot of times students will, they'll end up wishing there were more of them once you learn to kind of crack the code on data sufficiency questions. Verbal covers critical reasoning, so that analytical reasoning ability, sentence corrections, which is a lot of English grammar, and reading comprehension. Now, I mentioned that you have the opportunity now of selecting the order, and I do want to just touch on this quickly because that's what I'm here for, right? To give you some ideas and give you guys some suggestions and some guidance. If you haven't taken the GMAT since the new format was released, you now have the option. And in theory, you can mix and match 4 different sections a number of different ways, but the GMAT will only give you 3 options: option 1, option 2, and option 3. And my suggestion, so tips for how to choose which order selection to choose, is first and foremost, choose option 2 or number 3. And the reason for that is because of what I already talked about, right? Your verbal and quantitative scores are going to be the more important score. And so let's attack those sections while you're freshest, right? Let's leave the writing, the analytical writing, your essay and integrated reasoning sections until last, where you're maybe a little bit mentally fatigued. And so, okay, you might not do quite as well, but, let's be honest, the integrated reasoning score, if you get, a 5 instead of a 6, really probably isn't going to sink your ship, right? As long as you can still do okay. And same thing with writing your essay. So let's attack verbal and quant early on when you're as fresh as possible. And then my second tip is, in most cases, my advice is to start with your weaker section. And the logic behind that is the exact same. If you are weaker at verbal, for example, let's do it when you're freshest, when you have the most mental energy. Think about reading comprehension passages, for example. They can be challenging. It can be tough to concentrate and dissect and understand what you're reading when you get kind of a fairly long, dense passage about something that you don't really understand anyway, or you don't know much about, and you're trying to understand something about physics or archaeology or, who knows what the passage is about. That's hard enough when you're fresh, let alone when you're tired. So let's go ahead and do it when you're fresh. Vice versa, if you're weaker at math, let's do math while you're fresh. Now, the caveat, kind of my third tip, the exception to that would be if you feel like test anxiety is going to be an issue for you, a lot of times it's helpful to get out of the gate strong. If you're the type of person who, if you start with your weakness and sure enough, you feel like you're not doing very well, and it will rattle you and you'll be stressed and you'll be nervous and you'll feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing well and I just wasted my time and my money and I'm going to bomb this. And if that's your negative self-talk and you're going to be anxious, right? A, we need to kind of coach you away from that, build your confidence up a little bit. But B, okay, fine, start with your strength. Start with the strength, get off to a positive start, build a little bit of confidence, build a little bit of momentum, and you'll still be okay when you get to that second section, even if it's a weaker section. So just some things to think about. Ultimately, your score, will not be determined largely by which option you choose. It's not like, oh man, if only I had gone with option 3 instead of option 2, I probably would have gotten, the 650 I needed. That's almost certainly not going to be the case, but it's more from the psychology standpoint of kind of setting yourself up for success as best as you can. So if you have any questions about that, we'll field them at the end. Now let's talk let's talk about what it is going to take to prepare well for the GMAT and to put yourself in the best position for success. And I want to talk to you about the test psychology. And I want you to think about what it takes to get good at anything. Anything that you've ever successfully kind of figured out or learned or mastered or gotten good at in life could be a sport, maybe a sport that you're good at. You're good at playing golf or skiing or tennis, or maybe an instrument. Maybe you know how to play the violin or piano or learn a new language. Anything that you've tried to learn and figured out how to do fairly well, what did it take? And there are really 3 components, and these 3 components are the exact same kind of the triad of success, I call it, the 3 components that will lead to success on the GMAT. And the first is the what to do, right? So if you're learning to play golf, we have a picture of a golfer up on the screen here, you would need to learn what to do. And I could hand you a book that says, okay, here's how you hold a golf club, and you use the longer clubs for longer shots and shorter clubs for shorter shots, and here's how you putt the ball, and here's how the scoring works. And it's all the what to do in terms of how to play golf. Same thing on the GMAT. There will be things you have to actually know. You have to learn how to find the hypotenuse of a right triangle, subject-verb agreement and pronoun agreement, and how to analyze arguments, and how to find the roots of quadratic equations. And right, so there's just some stuff that you have to know, right? And that's the what. But is that enough, right? Can you just take a textbook and learn a bunch of formulas and feel like you're going to do well on the GMAT? No, obviously not. Just like you can't read a book about how golf works and expect to be able to play golf. So the second component of success is strategy. And I would suggest to you that strategy is the major differentiator between those who do well on the GMAT and those who just do okay or not well at all. Just like on the golf course or playing an instrument, people who have strategy can get from point A to point Z a little bit more effectively, a little bit more efficiently, can kind of adapt to the terrain. All of those types of things are going to do better. They're going to be more successful. And so on the GMAT, there's a lot of strategy, everything from how to do problems in a non-traditional way to time management strategies. And so you need to invest and focus and learn strategy as much as you need to learn content. And then finally, muscle memory, right? Practice, practice, practice. I can teach you everything I know about golf, and you can even learn some strategies, but until you get out there on the driving range and the practice green and hit ball after ball after ball, you won't be as successful at golf. Same thing with the GMAT, right? You'll learn a bunch of stuff. We'll teach you a bunch of strategies, whether you learn it from a book or videos, whatever it is. But until you work dozens, if not hundreds of practice problems and learn the pattern recognition and develop that muscle memory, you're not going to be as successful as you want. So this is the triad. And what I want to do in our time remaining is let's break these down a little bit more, each of these 3 components. And I'm even going to give you some really cool strategies today to help set you up for success. So part 1, though, first is the content. And let me just kind of tell you what content you're in store for. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. As I mentioned previously, it's a lot of high school math. There's no calculus, there's no proofs, there's not like a lot of high-end college level math. It's a lot of basic arithmetic, basic algebra, basic geometry. Fractions, percents, decimals, some simultaneous equations, some quadratic equations, right triangle, circles, some coordinate geometry. And for some of you, if it's been a while, you might be looking at this list saying, oh my gosh, I don't remember any of that stuff. That's okay. It's all learnable or relearnable. We can teach all of this to you. And more importantly, we can give you shortcuts for how to get there. but this is really kind of what you're in store for. On the verbal side, the sentence correction questions test a lot of English grammar, focusing on the big six, or I encourage you to focus on the big six grammar categories of subject verb agreement, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism, idioms, and verb tenses. There are some other nuanced grammar rules that you may see, but those are kind of the biggies. Analytical writing, your critical reasoning questions comes down to learning how to identify the parts of an argument. And specifically, I would suggest learning to identify patterns of arguments, because that's how you'll quickly be able to identify assumptions. And then if you do one thing, if there's one thing you can completely control and start doing more of starting today, starting right now, between now and test day, it's to increase the amount that you're reading. So whether you have a week before you take the GMAT, a month before you take the GMAT, or 6 months before you take the GMAT, read some more, read some more, read some more, increase your reading. That's a great way to improve your reading comprehension. And then, of course, most of what we talked about here, will apply to the essay for the critical reasoning stuff, the analytical reasoning. Where to focus? If you don't have very long to prepare for the GMAT, here's the good news with the GMAT. I'm going to flash these up on your screen. These are kind of the high yield areas. You may have heard of a famous principle called the Pareto principle. It's a business concept. It applies to a lot of things in life as well. And it's the idea that about 20% of your inputs will result in about 80% of your outputs. And so, or, in the sales world, right? 80% of your revenue and sales will come from 20% of your clients, right? These are kind of like the biggest bang for your buck clients or inputs or whatever world you're living in. And on the GMAT, it's very, very much the same way. That there's a ton of stuff you could potentially see on test day. There's a lot of stuff in theory you could, and maybe if you had a lot of time, should learn. But there's also the Pareto principle that says, yeah, but here's the stuff that we see most often. Here's the most commonly tested stuff, the stuff that we just see over and over and over again. And the high tested content areas below. So if you don't have much time, focus on the common word problems, things like distance time problems and work rate problems and sets. Triangles, and specifically right triangles, are the most commonly tested geometric figure, so focus a lot on right triangles. Data analysis, which includes not only learning how to read charts and graphs, but also things like probability. So probability is a biggie. Patterns of arguments for the critical reasoning. I talked about how that will put you in the best position to be able to find assumptions, which is the key to answering a large number of critical reasoning questions. So really focus on argument patterns, and then learning how to do figures effectively. So those are kind of the big content areas, and also learning the non-traditional math strategies. So let me go ahead and talk about those so that we stay on time. So part 2 is that strategy piece. And there's a lot of components of strategy, right? There's time management strategies. There's specific strategies for each type of question, but some kind of like big picture strategies. One of the more important set of strategies I teach my students and really start with are non-traditional math techniques. Your goal is to get right answers, not to make your high school math teacher proud of you, right? And so often, we come to the GMAT trying to solve for X, trying to solve everything the traditional way. And if you're good at doing that, great, more power to you. But in a lot of cases, you're not. Or even if you think you are, you can make mistakes that way. And so what if we learn how to do some of these problems in a non-traditional way? And one great way of doing that is a strategy called working backwards. I'm not going to teach that to you here. I cover it in my free lesson. You can click on the free session tab at dominathegmat.com and get that strategy. Another one, though, which is a great way of avoiding traditional algebra, is a strategy called making up numbers. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Now, in the interest of time, I'm just going to talk through this. It might go over your head. You might get it instantly. I think they're going to be sending out a replay link so you can rewatch it if you need to. But let's assume you see a question like this. And some of you just might be breaking out in hives, right? It's been a long time since you've seen questions like this. And this is exactly what you hated about high school math. And it's exactly what you hate about the GMAT. Like, why do you have to answer a question like this? Like, if a school cafeteria needs C cans of soup each week for each student, and if there are S students in the school, for how many weeks will X cans of soup last? And man, I got to think about this algebraically and like do S's over X's times C's, and what am I doing? And which of those answer choices is right? So what if instead we use the strategy called making up numbers? And the strategy simply says, let's take ourselves out of the esoteric world of variables and bizarre arcane math, right, algebra, and let's make it concrete. So let's make up numbers for each of the variables in the problem. So let's let C equal 2, right? So now it says if a school cafeteria needs C cans of soup. Oh, okay. Well, let's just assume we have 2 cans of soup. Okay, for each student. And if there are S students, okay, let's be very practical. Let's assume there are 5 students, right? Then how many weeks will X cans? Okay, well, let's just assume 20 cans. So you literally are just going to make up numbers for those variables so that now the problem essentially would look like this if they had used real numbers. And if you were to compare them side by side, which problem would you rather try to solve? Like, obviously, I'd rather solve this problem, a problem that has real numbers. And forget for a second that the answer choices still have variables in them. Now the problem itself is at least manageable. Like, you still may have to brush up a little bit on proportions and remembering the very, very basics of, basic arithmetic, but I think most of us could solve this problem with real numbers. So now it's not so scary. And a problem that is otherwise considered a fairly challenging problem by the GMAT because of all the X's and C's and S's now becomes fairly straightforward. So that step 2 is, okay, now we just work the problem using our numbers. With real numbers, if we have 2 cans or require 2 cans per student, and we have 5 students, that means 2 times 5, that means we have 10 cans. We need 10 cans per week, right? 2 cans per student times 5 students, 10 cans per week. Pretty straightforward, right? I think most of us could do that. Okay, so then the question becomes, how many cans will we need for, or how many cans, or how many weeks will X cans? Well, if X is 20 cans, you just double the recipe, right? This is a simple proportion. It's like if you're doubling a cookie recipe, boom, there we go. 10 cans for 1 week, 20 cans will last 2 weeks, right? That's it. That's the answer to the question. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and just plug our answer choices or plug our variables back into the answer choices and see which one works. And so you can go in and plug them in for answer choice A. That doesn't match. B, that doesn't match. C, that doesn't match. D, yep, look at that. If you plug in X equals 20, C equals 2, S equals 5, it equals 2 weeks. That's the answer we got. It works. Boom. You check it and you move on. So this is the mindset. I hope you kind of understand what I'm talking about here. Making up numbers is a great strategy. So it takes a little bit of time, like I said, just because you know the strategy. You now have to get out on the practice range and hit some balls and like work on it a little bit. But I think once you at least understand that coming at problems in a non-traditional way, that will certainly help you, and that's the mindset that you want to take in. Figures are another great way to apply strategy. Take a question like this. In the circle below, PQ is parallel to diameter OR, and OR has a length of 18. What is the length of minor arc PQ? So is there content that I could teach you here? Yes, I could teach you all about circles. I do teach about circles in my course. I could teach you how inscribed angles, like the angle 35, is half the degree measure of the arc it creates. So arc OP would be 70 degrees. And then the way parallel lines work, that also means that angle QPR is 35, which means arc QR is 70, and blah, 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 right? A bunch of content and a bunch of math that maybe it's worth learning. Yeah, it probably is worth learning, but your goal on test day is to get a right answer. So how can we use the information in the question itself to get a right answer? Like if somebody put a gun to your head and said, like, what is that length of arc PQ? Even if you didn't know how to do the math, but you know that the figure is drawn to scale, what can you do? Well, we have a frame of reference. The question gives us the reference point. It tells us that line OR, right, the diameter OR, has a length of 18. So you can think of that like the key on your map. If you're trying to drive across the country and they tell you that, such and such a distance is 500 miles, you can figure out how far it is to go from New York to Cincinnati. Same thing here. If OR is 18, like how big is PQ? You can literally hold a piece of paper up to your computer screen or drop little lines down mentally or just kind of look at it and say, it looks like about 3 of those PQs will fit inside OR. Like PQ is about 1/3 as big. And in fact, it would be exactly 1/3 as big if you were to hold the piece of paper up, put a little tick mark and hold it up and say, yep, 3 of those will fit in there. That means PQ is about 6. Boom, that's it. And if you remember that pi is 3.14, answer choice A is about 6, right? So can you always get right answers just by like eyeballing it? No, but you need this bag of tricks, bag of strategies. If you have a figures question, what do you do with those? If you have variables, can you make up numbers? If you have answer choices that are all numbers, can you work backwards? Strategy, strategy, strategy. I don't have time to go through this final question, but I do want, because I do want to talk quickly about practice and then turn it back over so we can do a little bit of a Q&A. In terms of practice, you just need to do tons of repetition, tons of practice problems, develop that mental stamina, and take lots of computer adaptive practice tests. So you'll learn the content. We talked about that. Content, content, content. You need to learn some stuff. But oh, by the way, maybe we can still get right answers a little bit more efficiently with some of the strategies that I just taught you today and other strategies that you can learn, but now we have to apply them. We have to apply them under test day conditions, and the best way to do that, to develop your internal clock, is to take full-length practice tests. There are 2 free ones that I highly advise you take that you can download at mba.com. You actually don't download them, you take them through their web browser at mba.com. And then if you want more than just those 2, I have 5 available on my website as well under the practice tab at dominateTheGMAT.com. In terms of resources, the official guide to the GMAT Official Guide 2018 just came out a couple of months ago. It's the best source of real former GMAT questions. So absolutely, you should have that book in your library because they're questions straight from the makers of the GMAT. The other book I like and use in my course is a book called Ace the GMAT. And the reason I like it is because it groups problems in buckets, meaning similar types of questions. So if you're working on triangles, you can work a bunch of problems just about triangles and just about probability and just about subject-verb agreement and just about, generalization arguments. And so the problems are grouped very, very nicely from easy to challenging questions in those buckets. In terms of the time commitment, in an ideal world, if you were starting from scratch, you would have 2 to 3 months to prepare, anywhere between 60 and 100 hours most people put into preparing for the GMAT, but huge gains can be made. I've literally had people sign up for my course the week before their GMAT and just try to cram as many videos as they could or work as many practice problems as they could, and every little bit helps in terms of increasing their score, and they've gotten great results in even just a week or 2 or 3 weeks. So if that was going to be your story, I would go back to that earlier slide and really let's work on the high yield areas first, and I can help you with that. I can give you some suggestions on where you should focus your time. We can see where your weaknesses are, and you can really hammer away at those weaknesses if you have a short amount of time to prepare. But again, if you have some time, if you have a couple of months or even just 4, 5, 6 weeks, that should be really good amount of time for you to make a serious dent in your GMAT score. Along those lines, I do have a full comprehensive GMAT prep course that will take the guesswork out of preparing for the GMAT for you. It's comprehensive. You'll learn all of the strategies I've talked about here today, as well as all the content. It'll increase your confidence. Flexible, it's on demand. So for those of you who do only have a week or 2 or 3 weeks, you can move through it at your own pace as quickly as you would like. If you have more time, you can take as long as you need. And exclusively through UCD, you have a coupon code to save 25%. So I'll leave this up on the screen for now. Actually, I don't know if Ethan, if you want to, or Amy, if you want to bring back your slides or just leave this up, but we can go ahead and move to the Q&A. But let me just say, I'll look forward to working with you if that's what you choose, but hopefully you've learned something today and have a better mindset about how to dominate the GMAT. So appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll field your questions.
Thank you so much, Brett, for all that wealth of information. As Brett shared, we have a number of GMAT promotions that are running on, and so we'll be sending out a link with you shortly. We have a great one with Dominate the GMAT, as well as other partners, where on the front end, everyone will get a discount code that is applicable. And then if you become one of our students and you enroll, you actually get the balance refunded in your winter. So not fall, but winter quarters tuition as well, too. A few things for next steps, and then we'll move into the Q&A. If you're interested in starting your application fall 2018, you can actually go to that link. You guys are actually our first webinar of the year, so you can go to that link available right there and start the 2018 application. If you do so in the next 7 days and send an email to Sam Bishop Green, we'll actually go ahead and waive the $125 MBA application fee waiver for you. Our round 1 deadline is approaching on October 11th, and then round 2 is coming up on November 29th. Both of those deadlines will actually get you an invitation to Impact Sacramento, to Destination Impact. That is our big admit event for our students in March. Impact Sacramento is coming up at the end of the month. If anyone is local in the area, we actually have the CEO and founder of the Sac Republic FC, Warren Smith, is going to be speaking with our students about galvanizing teams and bringing a community behind you. We'll also have Tim Stallings, who is their VP of Merchandise and one of our UC Davis MBAs, there as well too. So it's a great event to kind of learn about what are the incredible speakers you'll get to hear from, and also perspective about the MBA from there. So with that said, why don't we go ahead and move into the Q&A with myself and Brett. We can go ahead and open that up so you can go and write your questions in. As you guys do that, I know Sam has been busily answering a lot of questions throughout the session, so I just wanted to highlight a few in case they're applicable to other people. There was a question about the GMAT. How often can I take it? What's the latest I can take it? How do you guys view it? You can take the GMAT up until the day of the application deadline. So up until October 11th, you'll leave the test center with a sheet of paper that gives your scores, and you can self-report your scores. Just make sure you type in very carefully, and then we'll be able to verify that on the back end with us. We're going to go ahead and look at the highest scores that you submit, and we're also going to take into consideration your deep motivation to be the best possible candidate. So if you take it multiple times, don't worry. What I would say, one favor you can do for yourself is report all of your scores. I know you can look at a score and then cancel it. Please don't do that. That's like you never did it. Sometimes I've had students cancel scores that, when they've shared it to me verbally, have been admissible. So let us decide. Put together the strongest application. Get in touch with your associate director, whether that's Sam for full-time. John Lyon is our Bay Area associate director, and Joel Pulliam is our one for Sacramento. So go ahead and do it that way. As well. Okay, and let's see, what other questions do we have coming on up here? The other element I had a question for is about work experience and how valuable, how is that considered with the MBA? I would say that question really varies between full-time to part-time. So if you're looking at a full-time MBA, the way that you want to think about that is you are looking to see, can my previous experience combined with this degree help me create a new set of opportunities for myself, and will a recruiter legitimately take me legitimately for an MBA level position? For that reason, we are recommending, while we don't require work experience, we recommend that candidates do come to us with work experience, because you're going to be competing with other MBAs with work experience. So that's where the work experience is very valuable for placement, but the other element is also thinking in terms of what you're bringing to the class discussion. From time to time, we will bring in students who have had phenomenal internships. Perhaps they started a company or whatnot, but they tend to be more in the aberration than the rule. For part-time, there's a little bit more flexibility on that. The GMAT research is showing that students who get their degrees earlier for the part-time actually will get the best return on investment. The reason why you can do that is because you're going to be building out your work experience while you are going through the program as well too. There's another question about how many MBA candidates from each class are alumni of UC Davis. We actually, that's not something that we have, we don't consider that in your admissions process. Through that, I will say there's probably about anywhere from about 10 to 20% potentially in the class. I think that actually we get more undergrads in our Masters of Accounting than their MBA, but it's not something like if you're looking at a science research-based degree, that's something they pay attention to because they want to make sure you have exposure to different styles of research, not an issue on the MBA side. Okay. Any other questions that you guys have from this stage for myself or for Brett? Okay. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you guys all for joining us today. It's very exciting to be connecting with you this early in the process. I want to encourage you to continue to stay in touch with us and with the school as well too. And then I also wanted to send a huge thanks out to Brett for sharing with you all of your tips today. Any questions that you have, we'll continue to do the online chat. And then we're also available. You have my contact information there, and we'll be sending you out a note with more information too. Brent, any last remarks before we wrap up today?
No, I'm very excited for all of you. Best of luck to you during the application process, and best of luck to you on the GMAT.
Thank you guys. Take care. Have a great lunch, everyone.